Welcome to another chilling episode. Tonight we delve into 4 bone-chilling tales submitted by our brave subscribers. Each story revolves around seemingly routine deliveries that unravel into terrifying nightmares. Prepare for an experience where every package hides a dark secret. If you enjoy these spine-tingling tales, make sure to subscribe for more and share with friends who dare to confront their deepest fears. Let's begin. Story 1, The Cursed Package, submitted by Jessica from New Orleans. Jessica was a seasoned delivery driver in New Orleans, accustomed to the city's vibrant nightlife and its equally dark underbelly. The job was straightforward until she received a special delivery assignment one rainy evening. The address led her to an old ramshackle house on the outskirts of town, shrouded in an almost tangible sense of foreboding. The house seemed frozen in time, with its crumbling facade and overgrown garden exuding an aura of abandonment. As Jessica approached, the rain intensified, drumming relentlessly on the roof of her van. The front porch was cluttered with old furniture and debris, but amidst the chaos sat an ominous crate marked "Handle with Care." The crate was unusually heavy, and the stench of decay emanated from it, mingling with the scent of the rain-soaked earth. Jessica took a deep breath and carried the crate to the door, her footsteps echoing on the wet wood. She rang the doorbell, but it was as if time itself had stopped. After a long, uneasy wait, the door creaked open, revealing an elderly woman with hollow eyes and a skeletal frame. Her gaze was intense, almost predatory, as she took the crate with trembling hands. Jessica, though unnerved, tried to maintain her composure. The old woman mumbled something that sounded like a curse as she shut the door, and Jessica was left standing in the rain, her instincts screaming at her to leave. Ignoring them, she decided to take a quick peek through a nearby window. Inside, the house was dark and musty, lit only by the flickering glow of a solitary candle. The room was filled with strange, antique furnishings and dusty portraits of people long gone. Jessica watched in horrified fascination as the old woman opened the crate and began to pull out what appeared to be old, decomposing dolls. Their glassy eyes seemed to follow her every movement, their expressions frozen in eternal despair. Suddenly, the room's temperature plummeted. Jessica's breath became visible as the candle's flame flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. Her heart pounded as she watched shadows coalesce into sinister shapes on the walls. The shadows began to twist and writhe, forming grotesque, elongated figures that seemed to reach out toward her. A cold breeze swept through the house, and Jessica felt an icy hand grip her shoulder. She spun around to face a ghastly apparition, a woman in tattered clothing, her eyes hollow and her mouth twisted into a frozen scream. The spirit's cold gaze pierced through Jessica, filling her with an overwhelming sense of dread. Panic set in as the door slammed shut with a resounding bang. Jessica was trapped. The dolls, now animated and moving on their own, began to close in on her. Their eyes glowed with a malevolent light as they chanted in a low, eerie hum. Jessica's screams echoed through the night, but the old woman's house was as silent as the grave. As the shadows continued to consume her, Jessica's vision blurred and darkened. The last thing she saw was the ghostly figure of the woman, her face contorted into a cruel grin, as if reveling in Jessica's torment. The house was later found abandoned, with no sign of Jessica or the crate. Locals say the house is haunted by the restless spirits of those who perished within its cursed walls. Story 2, The Delivery to the Abandoned Asylum, submitted by Tom from Chicago. Tom had worked as a delivery driver in Chicago for years, but he had never encountered anything like the night he was called to deliver a package to the abandoned asylum on the city's outskirts. The asylum had been closed for decades, its imposing structure now a shadow of its former self, overgrown with vines and shrouded in decay. The package was labeled urgent and confidential, adding to the air of mystery surrounding the delivery. Tom parked his van in the overgrown lot and made his way to the entrance. The building loomed ominously, its broken windows like empty eyes staring out into the darkness. As Tom entered the asylum, the atmosphere grew heavier with each step. The air was thick with dust and the smell of mildew, and the corridors seemed to stretch endlessly. The walls were covered in faded, unsettling graffiti, and the floors creaked under his weight. The package was addressed to a specific room on the top floor, but the elevator was long out of order. Tom ascended the dark, narrow staircase, his footsteps echoing eerily in the silence. When he finally reached the top, the hallway was shrouded in darkness, lit only by a flickering light bulb that swung precariously from the ceiling. The door to the room was slightly ajar, and Tom could hear muffled noises coming from inside. He hesitated, then pushed the door open, revealing a room filled with old, rotting furniture and broken medical equipment. The air was thick with the stench of decay. In the center of the room was a gurney, strapped with old leather restraints. The package was placed directly in front of it. Tom's curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to explore further. As he moved around the room, he heard faint whispers and distant cries echoing through the empty halls. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, until they became a cacophony of tortured voices. Tom's heart raced as he realized the asylum was alive with the anguished spirits of its former patients. Shadows began to writhe and twist on the walls, forming grotesque, elongated shapes that seemed to reach out toward him. Suddenly, the gurney began to shake violently, and the walls seemed to close in, the asylum shifting and warping around him. The cries grew louder, merging into a deafening roar that filled Tom's head. He stumbled backward, knocking over a chair and causing a loud crash. The room was now filled with darkness, and the shadows took on a more tangible form. Tom saw ghostly faces pressing against the walls, their eyes filled with terror and pain. The figures seemed to reach out to him, their hands stretching through the darkness. Desperate to escape, Tom ran for the stairs, but the hallway was now a maze of shifting walls and distorted corridors. The shadows followed him, their presence palpable and suffocating. He could feel their icy breath on his neck, their whispers filling his ears with promises of eternal torment. Tom finally burst out of the building into the cold night air, but the terror did not leave him. He felt an unseen presence following him, a dark force that lingered at the edge of his vision. The asylum was later boarded up, but reports of strange noises and ghostly apparitions continued to plague the area. Tom's experience left him a changed man, haunted by the memories of the asylum's dark and restless spirits. Story 3. The package from the unknown, submitted by Emily from Los Angeles. Emily was a diligent delivery driver in Los Angeles, accustomed to the city's hustle and bustle. One evening, she received a delivery assignment to an address she had never heard of, a quiet, unremarkable house on the outskirts of town. The package was unusually heavy and had no return address, only a cryptic note that read, "For those who seek the truth." The house was an old Victorian with an overgrown garden, its once grand exterior now a faded shadow of its former self. Shadows began to writhe and twist on the walls, forming grotesque, elongated shapes that seemed to reach out toward him. Suddenly, the gurney began to shake violently, and the walls seemed to close in, the asylum shifting and warping around him. The cries grew louder, merging into a deafening roar that filled Tom's head. He stumbled backward, knocking over a chair and causing a loud crash. The room was now filled with darkness, and the shadows took on a more tangible form. Tom saw ghostly faces pressing against the walls, their eyes filled with terror and pain. The figures seemed to reach out to him, their hands stretching through the darkness. Desperate to escape, Tom ran for the stairs, but the hallway was now a maze of shifting walls and distorted corridors. The shadows followed him, their presence palpable and suffocating. He could feel their icy breath on his neck, their whispers filling his ears with promises of eternal torment. Tom finally burst out of the building into the cold night air, but the terror did not leave him. He felt an unseen presence following him, a dark force that lingered at the edge of his vision. The asylum was later boarded up, but reports of strange noises and ghostly apparitions continued to plague the area. Tom's experience left him a changed man, haunted by the memories of the asylum's dark and restless spirits. Story 3. The package from the unknown, submitted by Emily from Los Angeles. Emily was a diligent delivery driver in Los Angeles, accustomed to the city's hustle and bustle. One evening, she received a delivery assignment to an address she had never heard of, a quiet, unremarkable house on the outskirts of town. The package was unusually heavy and had no return address, only a cryptic note that read, "For those who seek the truth." The house was an old Victorian with an overgrown garden, its once grand exterior now a faded shadow of its former self. Michael, a delivery driver in New York, was accustomed to handling late-night deliveries, but nothing could have prepared him for the night he was called to deliver a package to an old, dilapidated apartment building. The building had a sinister reputation among locals, with rumors of disappearances and strange occurrences. The building's exterior was grim and foreboding, its once proud structure now a shadow of its former self. The elevator had long been out of order, so Michael climbed the dark, narrow staircase, his footsteps echoing eerily in the silence. The top floor was shrouded in darkness, illuminated only by the occasional flicker of a faulty light bulb. The apartment door was slightly ajar, and Michael could hear muffled sounds coming from inside. He hesitated, then pushed the door open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with old, rotting furniture and broken medical equipment. The air was heavy with the stench of decay. In the center of the room was a large, ornate mirror covered with a sheet. The package was placed directly in front of it. Michael's curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to investigate further. As he uncovered the mirror, he was greeted by a cracked and tarnished surface. When Michael looked into the mirror, his reflection was distorted and grotesque. Shadows in the mirror seemed to move independently, and he saw fleeting images of ghostly figures and faces twisted in pain. The mirror appeared to pulse with a dark energy, and the figures within it reached out, their hands pressing against the glass. Michael's heart raced as the shadows began to take on a more tangible form. The room seemed to grow colder, and the figures in the mirror became more aggressive, their faces contorted in silent screams. The mirror's surface rippled as if it were a portal to another realm, drawing him closer. The temperature in the room dropped further, and Michael felt an unseen presence breathing down his neck. He spun around, but there was nothing there, only the oppressive darkness and the feeling of being watched. The mirror's figures began to move more violently, their hands reaching through the glass as if trying to escape. Desperate to leave, Michael stumbled backward, knocking over a chair and causing a loud crash. The room was now filled with darkness, and the shadows seemed to close in on him. He saw ghostly faces pressing against the walls, their eyes filled with terror and pain. The mirror's dark power seemed to pull at him, and Michael could feel the cold grip of the spirits reaching out. He fled the apartment, but the darkness followed him, its presence lingering at the edge of his vision. The building was later boarded up, but reports of strange noises and ghostly apparitions continue to plague the area. Michael's experience left him forever haunted by the mirror's dark reflection and the ghostly figures that continue to torment him in his nightmares. Story 5. The Forgotten Package. Submitted by Rachel from San Francisco. I've been driving through San Francisco for years, but nothing prepared me for the night I received that package. Wrapped in yellowed paper with no return address, it had a chilling note: "Deliver by midnight." The delivery took me to a part of town I'd never seen before, desolate and eerie. The apartment building loomed ahead, its windows boarded up and the walls crumbling. The elevator was out of order, so I took the stairs, my footsteps echoing in the silence. As I climbed, I heard whispers and distant footsteps, even though I was alone. When I reached the top floor, The corridor was unnaturally cold. The door to the apartment was slightly ajar, and a faint, flickering light seeped into the hallway. Pushing the door open, I stepped inside. The room was filled with rotting furniture and the stench of decay. In the center of the room was an old wooden box. As I placed the package on the table, I noticed a portrait on the wall, a family with hollow eyes. The room's temperature dropped abruptly, and shadows in the corners seemed to move. The box began to shake violently, and a freezing wind swept through the room. Suddenly, ghostly figures emerged from the shadows, their eyes dark and empty. They moved toward me with unnatural speed, their cold hands reaching out. I felt paralyzed with fear as the shadows grew more aggressive, pressing in on me. I fled the apartment, my heart racing as I heard whispers and footsteps closing in. The door slammed shut behind me with a deafening crash. I made it down the stairs and out of the building, but the shadows seemed to follow me into the night. The building was later found abandoned and boarded up. Locals reported hearing cries and seeing shadowy figures. To this day, I'm haunted by those ghostly whispers and the twisted figures I saw. Story 6: The Midnight Order, submitted by Jake from Dallas. As a delivery driver in Dallas, I thought I'd seen it all. But one night changed everything. I received a package marked with a cryptic note, "To the last of the line." It led me to an imposing mansion on the edge of town, a place with a dark reputation. The mansion was gothic and foreboding, with overgrown gardens and boarded windows. I parked my van and walked up the creaky steps, the silence of the night pressing in. The front door groaned open as I entered. I followed a winding hallway to the grand dining room, eerily set for a feast. The room was filled with antique furniture and portraits of grim-faced ancestors. I placed the package on the table and turned to leave. A chill swept through the room, and the chandelier's light flickered out. When the lights came back on, the table was covered in grotesque, half-eaten food, and ghostly figures in old-fashioned attire occupied the chairs. Their eyes were hollow, and their expressions were filled with despair. The spirits began to wail, their cries filling the room. Shadows in the corners writhed and grew, forming grotesque shapes that reached out toward me. In a frenzy, I knocked over a candelabrum, and the flames cast terrifying shadows on the walls. The spirits seemed to close in on me, their eyes glowing with a malevolent light. I fled down the hallway, the cries of the spirits echoing in my ears. I barely managed to get back to my van, which was enveloped in thick, misty fog. The mansion was later found boarded up, and the spirits' wails haunted my dreams. Story 7: The Package of Despair, submitted by Laura from Seattle. As a delivery driver in Seattle, one night I received a package with a warning: "Handle with caution, do not open." The address led me to an old warehouse known for strange occurrences. The warehouse was dark and neglected, with a stench of rot in the air. Entering the warehouse, I followed a corridor filled with dust and cobwebs to a small office, where I was supposed to deliver the package. The office was cluttered with broken furniture and old files. I placed the package on the floor and turned to leave, but something felt off. The air grew colder, and I noticed a small, rusted box in the corner. A chill ran down my spine as whispers filled the room. Shadows in the corners began to move and shift. The room's atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. I saw dark figures emerging from the shadows. Their faces were obscured, and their cold breath chilled me. The package began to open on its own, revealing a grotesque, decaying doll with hollow eyes. The doll's mouth moved, uttering chilling phrases that seemed to resonate with an eerie malice. I was paralyzed with fear as the figures closed in on me. The room's temperature plummeted, and I could see my breath in the freezing air. In a panic, I stumbled toward the door, only to find it locked. I screamed as the figures reached for me. I eventually managed to force the door open and fled into the night. The warehouse was later found abandoned, with no sign of the ghostly figures or the package. The doll and the cold presence still haunt my dreams. Story 8. The Shadow Delivery, submitted by Ethan from Philadelphia. As a delivery driver in Philadelphia, I was used to strange requests. But one night's delivery took me to a mansion with a dark history. The package was marked with an urgent label, "To be delivered at dusk." The mansion was shrouded in darkness and mystery. Approaching the mansion, I was struck by its Gothic architecture and overgrown garden. I parked and walked up the creaky steps, feeling an oppressive weight in the air. The front door groaned open as I entered. I made my way through a grand hallway to a large, dimly lit room with antique furniture and an air of neglect. I placed the package on an old table and turned to leave. The lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. When the lights came back on, the room was filled with ghostly figures in tattered clothing, their eyes glowing with a sickly green light. They seemed to emerge from the walls, their movements jerky and unnatural. The room's temperature dropped, and an eerie, otherworldly wind swept through the space. The figures began to surround me, their cold hands reaching out. Shadows on the walls twisted and contorted, forming grotesque shapes. The atmosphere grew heavier, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. In a desperate bid to escape, I stumbled through the shadows, trying to find the exit. I finally made it back to my van, but the figure's glowing eyes seemed to follow me as I drove away. The mansion was later reported as abandoned, but I still see those glowing eyes in my nightmares. Story 9. The Cursed Delivery, submitted by Alex from Chicago. My job as a delivery driver in Chicago had always been routine until I was assigned a package to an old rundown theater on the edge of town. The package had an ominous warning: "Beware the curtain call." The theater was shrouded in darkness and decay. Broken windows and a crumbling facade greeted me as I approached. I entered through the main doors, which creaked ominously. The lobby was filled with dust-covered furniture and old movie posters. I followed a narrow corridor to the stage area, where I was supposed to deliver the package. The stage was covered with a heavy, tattered curtain. As I placed the package on the stage, I noticed a strange cold draft coming from behind the curtain. Suddenly, the curtain began to move as if pulled by invisible hands. The stage lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. A low, ominous hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. The curtain parted, revealing a ghostly figure in a tattered costume. The figure began to perform an unsettling, macabre dance, its movements jerky and unnatural. Ghostly apparitions appeared in the audience seats, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The apparitions began to rise and move toward the stage, their movements synchronized with the figure's dance. Panicked, I tried to leave, but the doors to the theater slammed shut, trapping me inside. The ghostly figures closed in, their eyes filled with malevolent intent. The stage lights flickered and went out, plunging the theater into darkness. The figures' haunting laughter echoed as I stumbled through the shadows, desperate to escape. I managed to force open a side door and fled into the night. The theater was later found abandoned, with no sign of the ghostly figure or the package. The haunting laughter and the ghostly dance have stayed with me ever since. Story 10. The Abandoned Hotel, submitted by Mia from Portland. As a delivery driver in Portland, I'd been to many strange places, but one delivery to an abandoned hotel was different. The package was marked with a warning: "Urgent delivery, do not delay." The hotel had been shut down for years and was known for its unsettling history. The hotel's exterior was decrepit, with boarded-up windows and a foreboding presence. I entered through the main door, which groaned as it opened. The lobby was filled with dust and the remnants of old, broken furniture. I followed a dark hallway to an old elevator, which creaked and groaned as it ascended. When the elevator doors opened, I was greeted by a dimly lit floor with old, faded wallpaper and an eerie silence. I made my way to a room at the end of the hall, where I was supposed to leave the package. As I entered the room, the temperature dropped drastically. The room was covered in dust and cobwebs, with an old rickety bed and a broken mirror. I placed the package on a small table and turned to leave. The door slammed shut behind me, and I was plunged into darkness. When the lights flickered back on, I saw ghostly figures in old-fashioned clothing standing in the corners of the room. Their faces were twisted in expressions of agony, and their eyes seemed to follow my every move. The air grew colder, and I could see my breath in the freezing room. The figures began to move toward me, their movements jerky and unnatural. Shadows on the walls seemed to stretch and writhe, forming terrifying shapes. I could hear whispers and ghostly wails filling the room. In a panic, I tried to force the door open, but it remained stubbornly shut. The figures closed in, their eyes glowing with an eerie light. I finally managed to break open a window and escaped into the night. The hotel was later found abandoned, but the ghostly figures and the cold presence have haunted me ever since. These stories are designed to immerse you in the eerie and unsettling world of American deliveries gone wrong, each filled with rich, terrifying details and unsettling moments. These stories remind us that the ordinary can quickly become extraordinary when faced with the unknown. Each delivery was meant to be routine, but led to encounters with the supernatural and the inexplicable. If you found these tales as unsettling as I did, be sure to subscribe for more spine-chilling stories from the darkest corners of our world. Share this video with friends who dare to face their deepest fears. And remember, sometimes, the most ordinary tasks can lead to the most extraordinary horrors.